Emerald ash borer, or EAB for short, is an invasive pest that has created an environmental crisis in St. Paul for the past 2 decades. Since EAB was first discovered in St. Paul in 2009, our professional forestry staff have been executing a management plan that focuses on the removal and replacement of public ash trees. Our staff know as well as anyone the impact that losing trees has on individuals and neighborhoods across the city. But we have reached a critical phase in the infestation. Dead and declining infested ash trees quickly dry out and become brittle, are prone to failures such as dropping limbs, and pose an increasing public safety risk. By removing these trees from the landscape, we can then work to restore the urban forest by planting a more diverse combination of species where they once stood. The City of St. Paul has chosen not to embark on a long-term treatment program for public ash trees, but individual property owners can find more.
Board of Commissioners meeting is now called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Freda?
Here.
Maris Castillo?
Here.
McDonough?
Here.
McGuire?
Here.
Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt? Carter?
Here. We'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I know that Commissioner Reinhardt should be joining us soon. She has checked in this morning and is doing her due diligence to keep us all safe with a little cough or cold, other symptoms. So we'll look forward to seeing her as we move into our meeting. The agenda of the August 10th meeting is before you for your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments on the agenda, which incidentally has been modified and posted to include a proclamation this morning on a special celebratory note? Without further comment, would the clerk please call the roll?
Maris Castillo?
Aye.
McDonough?
Aye.
McGuire?
Aye.
Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt? Freda?
Aye.
Carter?
Aye. Thank you very much. The agenda's passed and the minutes of August 3rd are here for your approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Any comments or questions on the minutes of August 3rd? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Maris Castillo?
Aye.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt, Bretham,
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. Thank you very much. The minutes have passed, and while Commissioner McDonough is on his way to the dais for a special proclamation, I just want to share that it is so unusual that we have incredible achievements, such as the one we are going to be sharing about today. We have had Olympians from the Twin Cities area, from Ramsey County, attend the Olympics, and certainly we celebrate and applaud them all. I'm going to turn this over now to Commissioner McDonough for the reading of a special proclamation in celebration of Suni Sali.
Thank you, Chair Carter. It's been an exciting couple of weeks here. First watching and cheering on Sumi, and then watching her accept the gold medal, and then for her to come home to such a warm welcome from our community, and to be a part of that in many different ways. And we're honored today to have Kali Her here, who's been a strong connection to the family. Her children actually trained with Sumi, and so she's been doing a lot of work to help kind of navigate all the celebrations and appearances, and everybody wants to be a part of this. And Sunday we had a great parade and ended at Aldrich Arena, and I want to thank our staff for everything they did to get things in place here on a fairly quick note. But at this moment in time, it is my honor to read a proclamation that Ramsey County wants to present. We'll get it to Kali, and then Kali will get it to the family. Kali will share a few words, and I think we have a video also with some of the members of the family. So with that, whereas Ramsey County resident gymnast Suni Lee returned home to Minnesota last week from the 2021 World Olympics, having just won the women's all-around gymnastic gold medal and championship. And whereas Suni was greeted at the airport by an exuberant contingent of family, friends, community members, elected officials, and others, who also held a parade and a celebration to honor her on Sunday, August 8th, 2020, at Ramsey County's Aldrich Arena. And whereas her family, friends, gymnastics community, East Side St. Paul neighbors, and her Ramsey County and Minnesota family are proud of Suni, who was born on March 9th, 2003 in St. Paul, Minnesota, as a first-generation child of Hmong refugees Yang Tao and Hua John Lee, and is a longtime resident of Ramsey County. Whereas the first Minnesotan and the first Hmong American woman to bring home the gold medal for women's all-around gymnastics, Suni illustrates the brilliance and excellence of Ramsey County's and Minnesota's Hmong American community, and sets a high bar for achievement to which young Hmong girls and boys can aspire in whatever avenue they may pursue. And whereas Suni's example of hard work, fortitude, and determination is a shining light and beacon for all in Ramsey County, Minnesota, and across the world, regardless of culture or ethnicity, race, religion, or gender identification. Now therefore be proclaimed, the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners declares August 10th, 2021 as Suni Lee Day in Ramsey County, and be it further proclaimed, we extend our congratulations on this day and every day forward to Suni and to all her family and friends, including her supporters and fans across Ramsey County, Minnesota, and the world. Let the record show that we will forever celebrate, cherish, and be inspired by Suni Lee's representation of Minnesota for and on behalf of all of us. So with that, I want to get the proclamation to Kali. Kali, please feel free to say a few words, and then we got a video that we're going to show.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you very much for this honor. I spoke to John and their family representatives last night. They were very honored to receive this proclamation. Suni has made it very clear that her win is not just for herself, but for the Hmong community and for all the Minnesota residents and for the United States. Born and raised on the East Side, she is a proud Ramsey County resident, and that they are very honored to accept this plaque today and the proclamation that has been for our August 10th to being Suni Lee Day. Thank you so much.
quick picture. Is that all right? Thank you. Before Cully takes off, I want to just share a quick story. I was working with a number of folks. So many people had a strong interest in wanting to recognize this great achievement, and things were happening fast, and people were having plans and thoughts. But I just want to mention it was the family's strong commitment to have that parade on the east side where they raised SUNY. It was they didn't have a lot of insistence. They wanted the community to really own this celebration, but the one thing they insisted was that parade was on the east side, on White Bear Avenue, and this celebration was at Aldrich Arena, a landmark in the community where they've raised their family and have so many important ties to. So thank you for your work in helping navigate that, and I think we're going to play a video now, right?
Yay.
It may come really fast. I may have to play it twice, but
Thank you, Ramsey County Commissioner. We apologize you cannot be there in person, but we really appreciate it for the proclamation. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Kali, we so much appreciate all of your efforts, all of the work that the committee of folks who came together on short order did. It was clear that folks here in Minnesota, in Ramsey County, want to celebrate Sunisa Lee. What a fantastic opportunity for us at such a time as this. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Commissioner McDonough, for that proclamation. And we will move now to our COVID update. All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. That's a tough act to follow. It's quite a change, but we're going to start today. We have a series of pieces to our presentation today. We're going to start with a general dashboard update and where things stand. Then we're going to walk through a few slides about the work that has taken place since the discussion here last week. And we'll end with a proposal around how we would propose to institute a vaccine and testing requirement for county employees and talk about some of the specificity around that piece. You will also just note that the mask mandate re-affected as of last Wednesday and instituted. There is a board action memorializing that in today's administrative items. So if we'd like to talk about it now, we can, or we can put that off. I'll defer that till the end. I'll turn it over to Incident Commander Laura Anderson to get us kicking off.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor, Madam Chair, Board. I'm glad to be here with a very brief COVID update for you all. I introduced the CDC's data tracker last week, July 27th, to members of the board. I wanted to just briefly acknowledge that we've seen our case rate accelerate significantly in the past 14 days. We've seen about a 32% increase in our case rate. We are still considered to be at substantial risk. Our community, our colleagues across the river have moved over to a high-risk environment based again on their case rate and testing positivity. As a community, the metrics that we watch are concerning. We're seeing higher positivity among those who are being tested. We're also seeing testing increase, which means that the positivity isn't necessarily as artificially inflated as we might think, or perhaps as it has been in the past. So folks are seeking testing right now, and their tests are more likely to be positive. We're also seeing concerning numbers from our hospital partners. They provide an update 3 times a week from the Regional Healthcare Coalition. Those numbers indicate that we're seeing more individuals who are hospitalized for COVID-19, and they're staying longer. They're being admitted into the intensive care unit. Nationwide, we're seeing fewer individuals being hospitalized for other conditions. So you can imagine that's concerning for us to see more healthcare resources being dedicated to individuals with COVID-19. The vast majority of those individuals who are being hospitalized for COVID-19 are unvaccinated. So I want to assure you once more, vaccines are preventing severe illness and hospitalization, just as we anticipated they would. Finally, I just wanted to share that we will be officially rolling out our incentive program as a community in coordination with our municipalities and our research folks. We will be rolling out our own incentive program starting this Friday, August 13th. The timing on this is excellent. We know that the statewide incentive programs are starting to shutter, so we want to make sure that we have additional opportunities to incentivize vaccine throughout the fall months. We have a good budget for this program. We feel strongly that we'll be able to incentivize folks who are receiving vaccine throughout the fall, potentially into the winter months based on our current vaccine uptake. One more item to share with you all is that we have again seen an uptick in demand at our vaccine clinics. We're delighted to see that. We're seeing younger folks obtain vaccine at our clinics, and we're getting more requests again from community members asking to host vaccine clinics. So that's good news for us, seeing that demand increase a bit. So now I would like to go ahead and cede the floor to our colleague, Director Ann Feeman in Human Resources.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having me here today. It's the first time I've been in Chambers, I think since one of my first few weeks on the job. So thanks for having me here today. I'm Ann Feeman. I'm the Deputy Director of HR for the talent team. Since our last board meeting, you have all given us a task to bring back to you a recommendation around what we're going to do with regard to vaccinations for employees. Deputy County Manager Kathy Hedin of our Health and Wellness Service team has facilitated multiple meetings across this past week. And our representation from that team included members from Human Resources, from Public Health, from Property Management, from Finance, from Policy and Planning, Risk and Compliance Communications, and the County Attorney's Office. We've been quite a busy group, facilitating conversations around the different options that we could take in the foreseeable future, in the next few months as well. So today, we're providing some background and context for this discussion. Public Health will provide more perspective into the rationale for this recommendation, addressing some of the questions that have come up over this past week. And the County Manager will present the final recommendation. So with regard to our background, we were tasked with resolving the concern about potential transmission, especially given the news in the last couple of weeks regarding COVID-19 and its variants. And so we're here today to provide our recommendation and a course of action to you as the board. This has been a balancing act for all of us, first prioritizing the safety and welfare of our employees and our residents, making sure that our employees are well enough to care for our residents, especially during this time of need with the ongoing ramifications of the pandemic, and making sure that we're really protecting our employees' health as well as our residents' health and well-being as well. We want to make sure that we're keeping in mind the morale of our employees, so we want to provide a solution and recommendation that will continue to build trust and the morale of our employees to ensure that they understand that we have their safety first in mind. We considered a lot of the different legal ramifications that have come up in the last few weeks around what does it mean to bring something forward with regard to vaccines in the workplace. And then we have to, and obviously want to, consider our unions and our labor partners and garner their support for this, as well as considering the different financial considerations, impacts with regard to things like incentives, or if we set up testing centers, those kinds of things, what the financial considerations will be. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Hawley, our Director of Public Health, for the public health perspective.
Thank you for that context and background, Deputy Director Feeman. Good morning, Chair Carter, Commissioners, County Manager O'Connor. Before I hand it over to our County Manager today, I'd like to provide some context and a public health perspective and rationale about this recommendation and really the importance of it and why we're before you today. And so as I think Incident Commander Anderson mentioned earlier, I just want to stress the importance that, full vaccination is 88% effective at preventing symptomatic Delta infections. We also know that the Delta variant causes more infections and spreads faster than any other variant of the virus that causes COVID-19. And I think we've stressed that a lot over the last few weeks. I want to mention that COVID vaccines help prevent severe illness, as Incident Commander mentioned this morning, hospitalization, and death from the Delta variant and the virus. Side effects typically identified with COVID-19 vaccine are mild, and so we want to stress that also, that it's important that, and we're encouraging people to seek the vaccine immediately. Individuals with more severe reactions should see support from their healthcare provider, so always access your primary healthcare provider if you have questions. Vaccinated people can get infected, especially when community rates of transmission are high, and so that's why we're encouraging mask wearing, face coverings, and social distancing also at this time. So a couple more things that I want to stress this morning is that natural immunity or immunity established by an earlier infection is not a robust prevention for new infections. And so that's why it's so important that we stress the use of the vaccine at this point. There is no approved treatment plan for individuals with early COVID-19. And so another important point and rationale why we're really stressing that this recommendation move forward today and be supported, because we know that vaccines are a part of the mitigation strategy along with face coverings and also social distancing, hand washing, all the things that Dr. Ogawa and Incident Commander Anderson have stressed over the last year. And so now I'd like to turn it over to County Manager O'Connor to talk about the recommendation.
Thank you, Director Holly. And I just want to underscore the piece that, and we're not only planning for a Delta variant, but for whatever potential variants come next. We need to be looking ahead as well as into the current. And what we've seen is that while we don't know what every variant would look like and the efficacy of a vaccine to combat that, so far what we've seen is these vaccines remain resilient and strong in the face of whatever variants have popped up, and it's the strongest tool that we have available. It's also important to stress that those under 12 still have no access to a vaccine. And we therefore need to do everything we can with those over 12 while preparing, as this board has talked about, for the day when those under 12 can access a vaccine. This is all an important part to that. I want to thank Public Health, Human Resources, Legal, and I feel like I'm forgetting a fourth area I was going to say thanks to, so whatever area that was. But Public Health, Human Resources, and Legal played a big role in helping to shape a recommendation. We had to reprioritize work over the last week to really make sure this bumped to the top and work through. We've looked at what's going on at the federal level, other states, other municipalities, to try to understand other approaches as well. And there's still a lot that continues to sift on the legal and regulatory side on a federal level, but there's a lot here that's positive as well. Moving specifically to the recommendation piece, the proposal here today is that employees will be required to submit their vaccination information, and using tools that we have available here to provide that information, probably for example, your Summit, where you already enter employee information is likely the way we would do that, or be required to undergo weekly COVID-19 testing and provide a copy of those test results to show a negative COVID test. And in addition to that, every employee will be asked to fill out an acknowledgement and sign a document that recognizes the following bullets. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but it's the key understanding, like you do with other types of training and understanding about the rationale underpinning why, and laying a basis and foundation for the rationale behind the county's approach to COVID-19 and why we believe this approach of requiring vaccination or weekly testing is important. So I think it's important to note, I know that you've heard from members of the public and in some cases employees, certain labor partners have reached out too. In many ways, we hear more from the sides expressing trepidation. You hear less from those who often feel a comfort from the idea of working in a workplace where the large majority of individuals are vaccinated and those that aren't have been tested as negative that week for COVID. As a part of that, people often respond back and say their concerns with a vaccine mandate. What I would say is this does not mandate that anyone has to get a vaccine, particularly during a time of emergency use with the CDC. What this says is you either have to get a vaccine or you need to show a negative COVID test. We want to move from being an organization that simply does not know where there is the potential of asymptomatic spread occurring in the organization and where, in fact, it may, in fact, be something that we need to snuff out. And we cannot fight this pandemic in the dark. And we are needing to bring better light into those rooms using the tools that are now available to us to do that. And we heard that last week. I left out the areas of compliance, policy and planning, property management, and finance, all of whom were a part of the working group. So I knew I was forgetting by one, I mean four. It was truly a team effort, and I want to apologize for not mentioning them before. In addition to the recommendation, I mean, this is the guts of the recommendation from the compliance side of employment conditions to be an employee in Ramsey County, which matters. We also, alongside that, I wanted to mention a few other considerations. We would like to implement an incentives approach that aligns similarly with the community-based incentives approach that rolls out this Friday, so that employees, when they post their vaccination status, would also be eligible for a similar monetary incentive as a part of that approach. And we're not going to differentiate between when the vaccination occurred. It's at the moment it gets posted as a part of the information online. We're also working through how we're going to audit the information. We have some part of the piece. The federal government is simply having people voluntarily disclose their information. And that's the extent. They're not asking to upload a vaccine card, and the health record piece gets very tricky very quickly on some of this stuff. We agree on the idea that we need employees. There's a part of this where we need to be able to believe the information submitted, and there's a way to post it. But there's also a way through other mechanisms we use around things like drug testing in certain parts of our organization and stuff. There's randomized ways to do things where you can have ways to audit your information as it comes in. And so we're working through those pieces as we go. But I just want to highlight the compliance side being a part of this, as well as the side of needing to get information into the system to give us that full information that we need. In addition to incentives, we're trying to align our timelines with others, including the federal government, as they are setting a broader framework for how a lot of this will, from a legal and regulatory side, sort out. Earlier we mentioned our labor partners and their importance in this work, particularly when it comes to the idea of graduated discipline in the event of non-compliance, right? And that's a pretty limited circumstance, but it's one we need to work through and intentionally be upfront about. And as we see what's going on at the federal level, there's a broader framework around us being set that will hopefully help inform what happens here locally. There is not a specific implementation timeline yet that we've been able to identify specific to the feds. What got rolled out was almost the aspirational side of the work, and there's clearly a lot under the hood going on. And what we've seen is that's a lot of places. And so I would like to ask that we continue to come back as of next week and continue to talk about specific timeline for rollout. Our goal is to have an incentive program up and running no later than sometime in September, and to be moving as quickly as possible towards, and that would mean information's needing to be uploaded into our system by that time, but move to the full-on requirements somewhere as close as possible. The other piece that comes up and everyone talks to a lot involves the redesigned Ramsey County workplace. What do we look like as we come back in greater numbers into the office to do our work? And we have a full workshop plan to talk about what we've learned up till this point on the flexible workplace policy next week. And so a part of this times well to have that conversation then. But I think it's important to repeat the conversation we had last week, that when in substantial or high realms of transmission, what we were saying is we would need to pause any returning to the workplace in greater numbers due to the increased risk of transmissibility of the virus. Well, we're currently in substantial. Some of our neighbors are in high. It's very likely we could end up in high sometime this week. And so just from full clarity, the idea of returning in the way that we thought after Labor Day is no longer the option in front of us. We're going to need more time. I'm not here to lay out a timeline with you necessarily today. We'll talk more about specific phased rollouts and what we could time that to next week. Hennepin County had an announcement go out this week about November 1st being their new date. And they don't have a workshop next week. And so part of this is it timed really well for us to come back. But I do want to say that because implementation of this policy for many will be impacted a lot by that return to work being a big part of it. But we have, and what we want to do is have a policy. Sorry, it's a little scattered. We've been doing a lot over the last few days. We want to have a policy where those who are in our workspaces immediately and are required to follow whatever we implement are not subject to a different approach than those who would come back in November, December, or January, for example. it needs to be a consistent approach for employees across that timeline in terms of how it gets implemented, what it looks like, and both the sanctions and the incentives need to look the same the whole way through. The final piece, we do believe we're going to need to do a request for board action, both on the side of dollars, on the monetary side associated with incentives, to make sure that that has been carved out, as well as on the employment conditions piece here around this expectation around a requirement of vaccination or weekly testing. My hope is to bring that back next week, no later than 2 weeks from now. If it's not next week, I'll give you specific reasons as to why. We needed a little more time to both hear from you all today and then bring it back through, but wanted to be declarative today about the approach we are proposing. We did look at a range of continuum options that are lighter than this, all the way to thou shalt be vaccinated by a certain date or else, and came down here as the recommendation that we thought was both aligned with other places in what we're seeing, as well as what seems to fit best for our organization to get that information in. I will stop there, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback, and I hope commissioners feel this is responsive in the development to the conversation that we had last week.
Thank you very much. And we really do appreciate all the work that staff across the county have been doing as we look at these opportunities to ensure safety and well-being within Ramsey County. I do see hands up, first from Commissioner Ortega.
Well, first, I am supportive. I think we need to be prepared to bring back, first of all, open up the county and bring back our employees in a safe environment. But my questions are more public health questions that I need to ask, if you
Thank
don't
you.
mind.
Director Hawley is returning,
The,
along with Laura.
so Sarah or Dr. Gawa, anybody, the 32% increase that we have, I guess you could consider it a spike in a sense. Who are they? What's the profile of these folks?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, I had a feeling you might ask that question. So individuals who are newly diagnosed with COVID-19 are those who remain unvaccinated. We don't have a lot of additional data on those individuals. It's new information coming in pretty rapidly, so we're talking about the last 2 weeks of data. But typically speaking, we're not seeing pediatric cases at this point. We're not seeing necessarily vulnerable individuals, in part because most of those folks have already been vaccinated. Who we are seeing testing positive now are individuals who have not been vaccinated, even though, vaccine has been available since the spring. So that's what I'll share with you.
We don't have a breakdown between vaccinated and unvaccinated, because there are vaccinated folks being that.
That is true. There is a very small segment of individuals who have breakthrough cases, so they're fully vaccinated, but then they do test positive for COVID-19. Those cases are generally very mild. They don't lead to hospitalization. They don't lead to death. And here in Minnesota, that's far less than 1% of the new cases that we're seeing.
I know the last couple of weeks, because as I sit down to having dinner with friends or whatever, these questions come up, and you've already answered them in many ways, but people just, it is confusing. One of them is, well, if a lot of folks are telling me, well, I received COVID-19 already, and why isn't the county, for example, testing for, what do you call it, immunity or, I think you know what I'm trying to say, Dr. Okawa. Because that would be the equivalent of being tested. So if being vaccinated, if I'm not vaccinated and I get tested for, I know there's another word I want to, I'm sorry.
Antibody testing is probably what, yeah. So Chair Carter, Commissioner Ortega, thanks. So there is antibody testing. We can draw blood from individuals to see if they have antibodies against COVID-19. The problem with the limitation of antibody testing is that an antibody response is not always directly related to the antibody level in a person. especially to COVID. We know that it's more complex than that. And so it's not always a direct correlation of testing positive or testing negative to be 100% certain that someone is protected. The other thing that's important is that it's also not necessarily a way, it's definitely not a way to tell if someone is infectious. Because the only way to know if someone is infectious is to see if the virus is present in their body. And so it's not a good way to check for transmissibility, or an adequate way to check for transmissibility. So, yeah.
And the reason I keep raising this is because now I'm coming across quite a few people that are vaccinated but are upset with the mask mandate. And so now you get a sort of different kind of education. And see, I mean, this is one of the questions that have been raised. So all of this also applies to our workforce when they come in. So folks, because a lot of our workforce also believes I'm vaccinated, I'm okay. Or I could sustain being, you know, part of an environment where it could be spread. Okay, thank you. I thank you for the information.
Thank you. Commissioner McGuire, did you
Yes.
have your hand?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I appreciate those questions. They were some of mine as well. I appreciate all the work that everyone is doing. I'm curious just about the funding that we're using for the incentives. Can we use the American Rescue Plan dollars for that? I just wanted to confirm that we can use that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, I would anticipate that that would be the proposed funding source we come back with. I didn't articulate a dollar amount either. I would anticipate the funding request will come somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million to fully implement everything as a part of the program.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And then just to let you all know that, you know, we have, as I've been saying, we have our legislative team meetings once a week, and we were chatting yesterday about, you know, if there's any legislation that we need to work on, or if we need to mobilize, you know, our state or federal partners of AMC and NACO to get any help from our state and federal partners. We stand ready to work on that. And we just don't know what, you know, what rules we might need changed. So just to let people know that we're trying to be aware of what we might need for that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner Matascasio, then I believe Commissioner McDonough.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment because you said you want to hear feedback, and I think that you're on the right track, and I want you to hear that, and all the folks that worked really hard on this. I think this is a good proposal. It's fair. I stand on the side of, I think everyone needs to be vaccinated and wear masks until all of our kids do, but this is a really good approach that people still have choice. They can either get vaccinated or tested, and the rollout looks really strong. And so I appreciate that work. I want you to hear that I'm in full support of this policy proposal.
Thank you. Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Two things. One, I just want to confirm this includes all our employees in the county attorney and the sheriff's office. They're considered Ramsey County employees and have to follow our protocols.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner McDonough, I believe this will apply to all employees across the entire organization. And we've been in dialogue with one of those two offices a little bit, expressing some concern on the front end about where the information can be accessed and other pieces, legitimate questions that we need to answer along the way, and we're going to need to continue to work through that.
Right. Keep us updated on that, please. And then I appreciate the work that you've done, and I am supportive of the proposal. I would encourage you and your team to just consider maybe one piece here that I think could be important. There is a sense of urgency, right? I mean, this Delta variant has just changed so dramatically, so quickly, that consideration of the incentive maybe should be time limited. Because there's going to be a point where people just aren't going to believe. They're going to be so resistive. But we should try to force folks to really think, is this the right thing I need to do? Is the incentive enough to push me over? And instead of just letting this hang out there for, whether it's a November return or whatever, but I'm not insisting on that, but I would encourage, what would be the impact or outcomes if we had it time limited? Would we maybe be able to encourage more people to think about, this sooner and maybe actually get more people vaccinated quicker, and not precluding anybody who this incentive is enough to actually get them over the hump to actually say, you know what, I'm going to do this because of the incentive.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McDonough, I just want to acknowledge in the 90-minute dialogue we had yesterday afternoon, this was about 30 of the 90 minutes was on this particular topic about the right way to incentivize, show grace and learning along the way, and also get to the outcome that we seek to keep everybody safe. I don't have a perfect answer. We talked through all sides of it, and I can kind of talk on all sides a little bit too. We'll have an initial approach that we'll lay out in the request for board action. And then what I would say is, depending upon the behavior and what we're learning along the way, I would remain open to the idea of coming back and continuing that dialogue in whatever direction, but I appreciate the perspective.
And then just one more question. We feel if they choose not to get vaccinated, that testing once a week is the appropriate one. It catches things quick enough that we're not going to have kind of a spreader going on if we've got people exposed and they test positive in that week.
Chair Carter, Commissioner McDonough, our recommendations from Public Health are that weekly at this current spread is adequate. I will reserve slightly the right to increase, to make recommendations for increased testing if our case rates rise even more, if our community spread rises even more. This is consistent with what the CDC has made recommendations in terms of those who are in care centers, those with the highest risk, those who actually are, it's unusual, but those who are doing lab testing even, because they're tested regularly as well. So it's consistent with that. Once a week at this level of spread is reasonable. They have dropped to as often as twice a week occasionally, and in very, very, very rare instances to daily testing if community spread is super high and if individuals are unvaccinated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I have a couple of questions, and then I also have some comments. One of the questions that I have, County Manager O'Connor, is you said that you wanted the experience of people coming back to work to be the same in November as it is now. And I think that there's, we don't want to treat people differently, I get that. But the fact of the matter is circumstances could change and it would be different. And I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that and what you meant by that, because, a week ago things were different and that might require different protocols when people come back. So I just wanted to call that out.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, thanks for the question. And it's, in a recognition that we have more than 1,000 employees coming to work in our setting every day, and then 2,500 or more that are working in more remote settings or off-site, it's actually more around the idea of the consequences when we implement the policy of what happens if you say, I will not disclose and I will not get tested, which I admit is I don't think that's going to be a frequent issue to have. And so it's almost like you don't like talking about that end, but it's important that we think through all ends, from full compliance and willing partner to least compliant, non-willing. And on that end, I think it's important for both us and our labor partners and other employees who are unrepresented, all of whom we've heard from at different moments in different ways. Consistency matters, and that the way someone gets treated now or in November on that graduated moment needs to be consistent. And we need to be clear on that going into the employment conditions and the ways in which we enforce those conditions. That part needs to be consistent.
And then along that same line, we have a lot of volunteers within Ramsey County. Granted, we're not using as many probably because of, or maybe more in some areas and less in other areas. But how does this apply to people that are coming into our workplace to do work but not being paid as an employee?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, thank you. That's a good follow-up question for next week. I'll say that in this week's stuff, we really had a conversation first around employees. I don't have a great answer on that, but as we tier out now and think some about our partners in the community we work with as contracted vendors, we think about volunteers, where does that fit here is a conversation I'll bring back.
And then I have some comments as well. I know that Chair Carter mentioned that I was doing due diligence this morning before I came here. And the fact is, I woke up with some congestion and a little cough, and I went to get tested. And it came back negative. But I said I have to practice what I preach, and I am fully vaccinated. And in fact, in answer to, or partial answer to the question that you asked about if you had COVID and then tested for antibodies, I had that test done last year, about this time last year, because when I know that then it's acknowledged that I likely had COVID at the beginning of last year, but that was before they even were doing testing. And so I did have the antibody test, and it came back not enough antibodies or not antibodies, because it had been 8 months. And so even if people get tested, if they've had COVID, they're still being recommended that they get the vaccination, because we know that it's not the same protection, whereas the vaccination obviously has that. And I understand the whole provisional side of things, but that's going to hopefully change here relatively soon. And I think that changes the landscape as well. I think that, one of the things, wearing a mask, being fully vaccinated, it is the right thing to do. Because even if I'm okay, that doesn't mean that I can't spread something. And so I'm okay, I'm vaccinated, is fine for you. But the people that you love, the people that you care about, people that you don't know, and kids that could be infected by this, that's why you wear the mask. It's not really to protect yourself, it's to protect other people, and I think that's an important message to get out there. The mask is to protect other people. I also think that it's important to understand at this point, I just want to call it the Delta, because we keep talking about COVID-19. Well, COVID-19 that we were dealing with even a couple months ago is not what we're dealing with today. It is COVID. But the Delta variant is so different and so much more contagious, and Dr. Agawa and Director Holly and Deputy County Manager Hadeen have tried to make sure that message gets out, that this is different. And we really need to take an assertive and aggressive at the same time approach to how we are protecting people. I don't think it's not, it won't be a surprise within the next couple of days if we move into high. And we've got so many things that are going on that to be diligent and to be tested and to make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect, quite frankly, to protect the people you love. And so I share that because I think, again, it's important that we practice what we preach and make sure that we are protecting other people. And that's exactly why I was a little bit late this morning. Just one other comment, and this is kind of a side thing. I should have said it before, or asked it before. But one of the things that was brought up, and I think that we'd have to work with the business sector to do this, but when we're doing our incentive, they get cash from the state, they get cash from us. I don't think you can get both. But what if we worked with the business community, the Ramsey County business community, and said, hey, you want to give us some gift cards? Because we can't really choose to purchase them because we miss some businesses or whatever. So just an idea of trying to give an added incentive to have people shopping and buying stuff in Ramsey County. And again, I have no idea how it would work or how we could pull that off, but we're getting ready to give this other incentive, and maybe there's another way to not only encourage people to get vaccinated, but to do their shopping and business in Ramsey County. Thank you.
Thank you. County Manager, did you want to respond?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, thank you for the comments. We'll take those back. I wanted to clarify an earlier statement just a little. This policy specific, so the working group actually has answered some of the questions on volunteer pieces or where they're at. We didn't get to that yesterday. The policy right now in front of you pertains to staff. We're working on recommendations for contractors and terms of contracts. It'll also have considerations for recs for volunteers in our building. So those are two follow-up pieces here. And public health will continue to provide guidance for the public and visitors as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your additional ideas, which I know will be considered. Commissioner Fretham?
I want to build for a second on Commissioner Reinhardt's idea because I see our Community and Economic Development Director over there. Maybe not gift cards, but like a vaccine coupon book for vaccinated people to get out and get a discount on buying things in stores and restaurants. I love coupons, so and it will get people out again. So that was not why I had initially raised my hand, but thanks for letting me build on you. In terms of, I guess my question is, we talked a little bit about consequences for staff who refuse to participate. You talked a little bit about auditing. I'm wondering just about staff who submit false information and how that would, I mean, we might already have policies around that in other areas, and would they apply to this situation? Certainly there have been situations that have been identified in the media of people doing that. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that people are seeking fake documentation. And especially since, and I'm with Commissioner Mattis Castillo, this seems like a policy that really recognizes options and provides accountability for whatever choice you make, that folks who instead take that flexibility and choose to submit false information, what may be the consequence of that? And then you don't have to answer that quite yet, but I'll just add the other piece of it. Knowing that there are people who are hesitant and that our public health team is doing this work, do we have any plans for support or consultation for people with questions or misinformation, either through our public health team, through our EAP, through our, the health insurance provider, who could also, are they offering anything in terms of validation of vaccination? Just thinking through that more robust approach there, and how do we meet our staff where they're at and support them with good information, but also stand true in our understanding of the science and that vaccine is the most important way to stop this. And then I had one other, for the time limitation, I think that is probably a good idea. I would, in my mind, the thought is tying it somehow to the full authorization. When that comes, putting a clock after that, because I know there are folks whose stated concern is around the emergency use authorization. So giving that full authorization and time with that seems like one approach that sets a timeline based on one of those concerns. And the final question I have to ask, you referenced a little bit about some testing on drug testing, but I'm wondering if there are other vaccines or tests that we require for positions. I know I worked in direct care, and I think I had to have a tuberculosis test and needed to provide a documentation of my hepatitis vaccinations. And so knowing that this is something that we may require for other positions, I think just bolsters and embeds the need for this sort of vaccination when we're in the midst of a pandemic.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, let's see if I can take those in somewhat of reverse order. We do require vaccinations in specific jobs within the county, so it's not groundbreaking for Ramsey County for health reasons to protect both employees and the broader public to require vaccination as a condition of employment. And so you can build from that process. Of course, the infrastructure used to do that on a departmental level looks different than what we now need to do for areas where that has not been an expectation in the past. In the future, it sets you up really well too. So the next pandemic will be totally solid already. Sorry, too soon. Back to the, coach counsel discipline at a general level are things that we generally employ as strategies in the organization and want to be consistent in. And I don't want to go into specific, what might happen when and where. That's a conversation that needs to evolve in the right settings, and I don't want to get out in front of it here. But those principles would need to apply. And so how we employ that, I mean, you use different words, but I think we're saying the same thing there then in terms of how you graduate through and a general organizational level. And on the general piece around how do we check or how do we ensure compliance, and what people enter is what they say they do? This is a question that's been discussed. I need to always remind myself to start from the baseline that on the whole, since the board chose to have the mask mandate reinstated, since we're moving down this road, a majority of employees and residents in this community comply. Like a large majority. We're not getting these flashpoint conversations every day that honestly worry us when you watch the broader landscape around us. This is not the reality that we're facing as a community, and I deeply appreciate everybody for that, because Commissioner Ortega is not wrong when he says people are frustrated, right? I mean, he says that everybody's frustrated. Everyone around this table is frustrated, and yet people are doing the right thing most of the time. We still need to make sure, though, if there are public resources in play and there's like an actual thing, how do you then make sure there's an auditing piece to that, and we're doing our work, and we're going to do that. And so we'll make sure that that's a part of our approach as we go forward.
And I know that we're going to be moving on. Commissioner Reinhardt, you had on one of these points something to add.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I really agree with my colleagues here as far as I think the consultation offering that, because fear is real and we need to acknowledge that and how we can try to work through that. The fully authorized vaccination, again, that makes sense to me to tie things to that. I like the idea of the discounts. But I think the timeline, one of the reasons that the timeline is so important is because we have to stop new variants. Right now we're just focused in on Delta, but if we don't get people vaccinated, then what's the next one? And is the next one, the variant, going to be, is the vaccine going to be effective on it? And I think Dr. Ogawa, when she said the virus last week, the virus's job is to survive, and it'll mutate in order to make that happen, is something that we need to really consider, and that's about the variant. And then finally, I meant to say this when I spoke to begin with, but I get I have my rights and I shouldn't have to do this. But the fact of the matter is we have speed limits. We have other mandates that are there to protect, generally speaking, other people. What you do yourself oftentimes isn't mandated, but there are mandates there. You have the speed limits. You have to have your lights on at night. You have to have windshield wipers. I mean, there's all kinds of mandates that are meant to protect other people, and that's what this is. And I think if people start thinking about it that way, it may be more understandable, because this isn't about personal freedom. This is about keeping people alive.
Thank you. And to everyone here, thank you for the tremendous work that's gone on, regardless of what area of Ramsey County you were in. Certainly with our Economic Development Director here, I know that a lot of the comments that have been made around this table will be in consideration within a short period of time. We thoroughly appreciate the public health guidance that we are receiving and the tone of striking a balance today that you have set as we move forward with our mask mandate, consideration of vaccination requirements or testing, and giving adequate consideration to the urgency of the moment, but also to respecting individuals and providing an element of choice and understanding that this is about protecting all of us, and that as commissioners in Ramsey County, the information you're providing to us, the opportunity to act based on science and securing our community is what we are pursuing. So within coming weeks, we look forward to hearing back to you or hearing back from you as this information is built and the recommendation and opportunity for us to vote on upcoming work happens. So we are going to check back for just any final comments on our update and then move to our moment of meditation.
I'll just close, Madam Chair, with the appreciation for the direction last week and the continued, the collective belief here and through the working group, and the importance from our perspective of starting from a place of assuming positive intent with our employees and giving them every opportunity to demonstrate that, recognizing that we believe our employees, if we trust them, will make good, safe decisions for themselves and others, and building a system around that then that we can implement here. And so look forward to bringing back more in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Much appreciation. Thank you all. And so with that, we will move to our moment of meditation, not neglecting that we are yet in a moment where we have to be very mindful. Take a deep breath and set ourselves for much work to come. That moment. And thank you very much. I'm going to call on Commissioner Matis Castillo for our administrative agenda.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one item on the administrative agenda today, and that is a grant agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for local road improvement program for County Road J from Centerville Road to Otter Lake Road, including the I-35E interchange. And so I will move that agenda item.
Second.
Thank you for the motion and the second.
Some excitement on this side of the table. It's a really big deal.
Great energy behind that. Further discussion on the item? Thank you so very much, and we all anticipate with great joy this moving forward. We'll ask for the roll call.
Matis Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. Thank you very much. The item has passed. We have two policy items on our agenda. The first is the countywide policy regarding face coverings. We've talked about that, and this comes back to us today for approval. Did you have any further comments?
Madam Chair, I'd stand for any questions if they're there. Otherwise, we've
So we'll
talked
take a
about them
motion.
more.
Great.
So move approval.
Second.
Thank you. We've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Thank you. We'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Matis Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
Carter.
Thank you. Aye. That motion passes, or that policy item passes, along with the authority, I should say, for the county manager to administratively approve further changes to the mask policy, including when masks are required or recommended based upon CDC guidance and public health protocols, and to update us as needed. Our second policy item is on the American Rescue Plan Act funds for the advancement of the Ramsey County Economic Competitiveness and Inclusion Plan. Well, we have no vote on this.
No.
Right, I'm sorry, thank you. I do see that our Economic Development Director is at the podium. Thank you, Carrie, Director Collins. And we have the opportunity to hear from you today. Does the county manager wish to start that?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, all I'll say is pursuant to the conversation last week, this is the first of a series of ARPA-related presentations. Based on the discussion that occurs today, this would then be pending to come back next week as an item on the administrative agenda for the board.
Thank you very much. Director?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This kind of represents the first under this kind of process in terms of ARP allocations, and so we'll give you a quick overview. But on the screen, you should see American Rescue Plan Act, investing in the Economic Competitiveness and Inclusion Plan, so you can kind of see how we plan to execute against the larger vision plan. This is just kind of a reminder in terms of the tiers, and so this is a carryover from the presentation you received the last week. Right now, we'll be emphasizing Tier 5. Why Tier 5? We need to lay the groundwork now so that we can make the kind of transformational change that we are looking to achieve in Tier 5. And we'll get to timing in a moment here. This is to show kind of where the housing supply side fits within the larger columns for the ARPA investment. And so again, Tier 5. And this is kind of taking the economic competitiveness and inclusion plan. There are two main principal ideas. There's place-based strategies in terms of affordable housing infrastructure, and then there's the small business ecosystem. And so we heard a few comments about that earlier today, and so there's all sorts of ideas that are flowing, and I think some of our our chamber organizations could be a good partner in that advocacy as well. Today we're talking about housing infrastructure investment. We all know the criticality of housing infrastructure right now. We're continuing conversations about how we may play a stronger role in strengthening the small business ecosystem with DEED, with Greater MSP, with our city partners, and we want to have those conversations ongoing before we make an ARP request at this time. Again, grounding you in the information you received the past week, we've got a total of 107 to the county as a total here. But one particular piece that I wanted to call out is that the funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024 and spent by December 31st, 2026. And why that is particularly important with this request is, as we know, affordable housing, whether it be preservation or new construction, oftentimes has a longer runway to get off the ground. So we need to identify pipeline projects that may not break ground until 22, 23, and 24. And so I just wanted to kind of keep us in mind that 3 years seems like a long time, but not when you're trying to make transformational change in terms of housing infrastructure. You've seen this graphic before in a recent workshop. This is to kind of shine a light and a target on how we intend to invest ARPA dollars. And so that is around 30% AMI housing infrastructure. It may include permanent supportive units, and it may include just 30% rental units. But that's to show you kind of how we intend to target investment at this time along the housing continuum. Of course, alignment with our economic competitiveness and inclusion vision plan. You'll see strategy 1 for place-based inclusion, and the first recommended action, preserve and increase the supply of rental housing units for lowest income residents. That's what we're going to do. There's no surprises in terms of how we intend to use these ARPA funds for housing supply. And, we're all aware of kind of the data point that is 15,000 affordable housing units. And if you've been along for the HRA Levy Roadshow with some of our communities, you've probably heard me talk about this kind of analogy that is applying for or registering for a conference. And right now our built landscape is kind of built on many white residents receiving the early bird special, the early bird registration for a conference. So they got the lower rate, they got to, position themselves close to the conference site, no transportation required, they're set. But however, many of our ethnically and racially diverse communities were not afforded that special. And that's what our housing infrastructure is today. It's built on a legacy of wealth creation and built on racially restrictive policies of the past intending to exclude individuals. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that we see the race-based disparities in our county that we see today. So when we're lacking in housing infrastructure, we have individuals who are overpaying for their if you think about it in terms of conferences, they're overpaying for their hotel, 2-3 times. They're overpaying and they're requiring transportation to get to the conference site. I use this analogy because it's something that individuals that haven't experienced housing instability may be able to relate to. So we need to fix that, and ARPA funds gives us the ability to scale, to put a dent in that 15,000 units. So the economic inclusion plan doesn't just say we need greater housing infrastructure. It also specifies that we as county leaders need to do a better job of coordinating, aligning, and partnering with our community, with housing agencies. And so I just point to some of the content that's within the meat of the plan. County leaders and staff, together with partners across the housing spectrum, will work together to address critical housing needs, support services and disparities, to align public, private, and philanthropic resources in support of new housing supply and preserving existing affordable housing. And also, these economic priorities will need to ensure residents have an affordable place to call home and can affordably get to where they need to go. This involves leveraging and prioritizing resources, greater cross-jurisdictional coordination, and deeper partnerships with cities across the county to develop sites for industry and housing. And so although we're talking about setting aside some ARPA investments today, this larger kind of coalition type of support to leverage as many dollars as we can to create greater infrastructure is so desperately needed. And this was, of course, done before ARPA, before CARES Act funds. And so how we plan to do that internally with the resources available to us include, of course, our annual home allocation from HUD. It also includes the what will be the new HRA levy resources, which will come online next year. But again, we'll begin collecting taxes in 2022 for the HRA levy. But those funds may not be obligated to projects that don't break ground until 2023, 2024. And so ARPA creates a kind of bolus dose of funding to create and advance housing infrastructure that we just don't currently have, meeting the needs of our residents today. So I'll pause there, and I'll just take a moment to say, in terms of next steps, we do intend to come back with a request for board action August 17th, which sets aside $10 million of this first allocation. And we hope to come back next year with an even bigger request, $27 million, for a total of $37 million of housing infrastructure investment over the course of the ARPA kind of timeline. In the meantime, we intend to hold a ARPA Housing Investment Work Group kickoff with our city partners, housing agencies. We've started to identify pipeline projects, and we're waiting for the final Treasury guidance and review at this time. And so with that, I will pause for questions, but the last thing I want to say is, you know, I had this interesting conversation with my parents, who I often use as a litmus test for kind of an average Ramsey County residents. And I grew up just, you know, a few houses away from the SUNY Lee parade site. And so I was asking, how did it go? And they're saying, oh my gosh, we were stuck in our home. There was traffic everywhere. And I went, oh, you know, I'm sorry about that. No, they said, no, it's wonderful. This is awesome. This is so exciting. This is the best thing to happen in 18 months. And I thought about it, and I thought about this degree of investment. And we think about all of the stuff swirling around us. How inspirational is this? You know, and there's an inspiration deficit right now, and this is such transformative, you know, funding that we have never seen before, and that should be celebrated. And so, you know, opportunities to share in that excitement, we should use them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we do appreciate this opportunity to celebrate with you, knowing that this is hoping to plug such a very, very critical gap. Not enough, but it certainly does help. I want to check in with our county manager for a comment, and then we have a question from Commissioner McDonough and around the table.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, the only piece I want to add from context, just to put the bigger picture back in as well. So after the allocation the board made last year for about $10.5 million, actually for this year as a part of the budget, amended budget passed at the end of last year, this plus the ARPA money will signify basically 2 additional years of what the HRA levy would bring to Ramsey County that you were able to generate the resources for before the levy came on. I think that's always important to ground it in, is it represents, this amount represents 1 full year of an HRA countywide levy.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Carrie, you already answered one of my questions on slide 4. You got the 10 million in 2021 and up to 27 million for 22 to 24. So that's a total of 37, not a total of 27. That's good to hear. I share your excitement, but I'm going to read Tier 5 big swings: fuel, resources towards results, bold investments, spend to save more. I would suggest we should allocate even more than 10 million right now. I know the capacity is going to be an issue, but we need, my biggest fear is we're going to have 100 $1 million requests, and I know you know that, and you're going to guard against that, but there isn't a day where I don't get somebody coming to me, I got a great idea on how to spend your money, or our money, right? It's our money, it's not your money, it's our money, right? And I think we need to send a strong, bold message that this board has seen this, you know, this slide here on the 5 tiers, slide 2. We've seen it a number of times. We've endorsed this over and over as a way to move forward on this ARPA money. And I would suggest we do, you know, if not the whole 37 million, and allocate it now so we know it's there and it's done and that money's set. If we're not ready to do the full 37 for whatever reason, I think we should at least double this right now and send that message to the community. I toured and I know many of you are going to do this, right? Project Home and the family, and we're already having conversations, and everybody's, you know, scrambling about how are we going to continue to support our community for housing. I presented to the city council with Deputy Mayor Tincher on the work we're doing at Heading Home, and there is this weariness that we continue to have to invest in the crisis side. And we know we've got to get upstream in providing this 30% AMI, and not always with support, right? And that's going to be the nut to crack, is because the supportive services tend to help finance and stabilize that 30% into the future. And how do we do 30% without support of just the financial? Because a lot of folks, that's all they need. I would encourage us to double this, if not do the whole 37 right now, so the community knows we're all in on this. We're moving forward on this. And yeah, it'll cause you some capacity issues, but it'll also get you to be flexible and be able to be bold here about moving projects forward quicker and sooner, because there is this sometimes a 3-year lag. Let's see if we can shorten that lag on some of these projects so that we can actually bring stability to folks in our community. So that's my thought. I'm not going to make a motion to do that. I want to make sure my colleagues have a chance to weigh in, but I'd be more than happy going to 20 or even 37 million right now.
Commissioner McDonough, thank you so much for your thoughts and for the work that you are engaged in. As many of us are hearing from our partners and the considerations for plugging the gap here, but also moving forward, as you say. The issues that we have in particular with our lowest income residents only get worse as they continue to be in that lower level and see the increases in housing as they continue. It causes us greater problems. So I know we all have concerns for that 30% AMI level and being able to strengthen the work there. I know that you are hearing, our staff, I should say, is hearing the very same concerns and again, working in that balance. So we will have time to continue these considerations and to hear back before us any additional recommendations according to the needs that we see for allocating early, and for ensuring that we've made the statement and are preparing the work in that investment. I have others. I know Commissioner Frethen, Commissioner Matas Castillo. I think I also saw Commissioner McGuire, everybody. Okay, so we'll move forward in that regard. Commissioner Frethen.
Great. So I have 3 questions. First, on the improving climate resiliency piece and household utility costs, are there additional X dollars? We talk about the X dollars of other places we can leverage funds that could help leverage and really ensure that what we're building and investing in is towards the cutting edge of climate resiliency? Or would there be more of those X dollars if the infrastructure bill passes? So is this an opportunity to leverage the legislative committee, as Commissioner McGuire raised earlier?
And specific to kind of resiliency and sustainability, I think that there are funds out there that could target that particular side of what we'll call the housing continuum. So we talk about the affordable housing piece, but I think what you're referring to is housing affordability and ensuring you're reducing those the housing expenses side. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to partner and coordinate with Met Council and other agencies that are doing this work. And it may be through ARPA funds, and it may be through US EDA funds. I don't know to what degree we will see funding to this scale through those other funding relief sources. So it could yield in a singular or a couple different pilot projects, still worth vetting. I think now that we have capacity in our housing development division, we'll be able to look at all of the various funding sources. But I think that gets at your point about leveraging and expecting more, from our subsidy, not just gap financing traditional affordable housing development, although that's critical too, but expecting more out of it. What are you going to do to create kind of environmental sustainability? Weatherization improvements, rehabilitation of our housing stock is also critical. And so that gets at your sustainability piece as well. So I think it is, yes, there could be other funding sources, maybe not to this scale, but we will look to leverage as many funding sources as possible.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking more of as we're choosing to invest and where to invest, where does the climate resiliency placed in? I know at one point, I think maybe a couple of years ago, Commissioner Matas Castillo, we talked about having a climate impact analysis on our policies, much the same way we have race equity impact on our policies. And that's one where if I'm choosing between two projects and one also has embedded, you know, a solar panel or a you know, the white roof to reflect, or some sort of measures that produce additional climate resiliency, is that a factor that we can consider to try to incentivize either us helping them leverage those funds and bring those in, or those developers looking to develop affordable housing and capitalize on these funds to really go the extra mile and make sure that if we're building something that's going to last 100 years, we want to build it the right way, because it's going to last for 100 years. So that's more what I'm looking at, like how do we really embed that into the process and our decision making in this. My next request is just, can you say out loud how this fits with the broader spectrum of housing investments and how other areas of investment will still get funded in different ways, like when the HRA levy funds have been levied and start coming in, particularly around home ownership, because that's something I hear a lot. We don't want to just produce more rental housing. We also want home ownership opportunities and opportunities to build generational wealth. And what I'm hearing from this proposal is not that we are doing this exclusive, but that we see this immediate need that we need to fill, and that helps close a gap so that when we have the more robust funds, those areas for investment still exist and will happen.
Thank you, Commissioner. A couple of pieces with that, and I think just backpedaling a little bit, I think, for example, Met Council's LCDA program is really good at incentivizing kind of environmental aspects into affordable housing, and I worked on a project that had solar carports and solar panels on top of the roof and some really creative stormwater runoff design elements, and because of that, it was able to score better through Minnesota Housing's consolidated RFP program. And so I think it's those types of kind of that scoring rubric. If you're hitting equity goals and this, then that kind of pushes you in the front of the line. I think that those are the types of processes we hope to build out. In terms of the kind of you know, other pieces, you know, I think the home ownership side is critical. And I think you know, there's two sides of that. There's ensuring that there's ample funding for down payment assistance, and we have our first-time home buyers assistance program, so we're going to be looking at ways to amplify that through home funds and through other means, and also partnering with the private sector, who I know is eager and hungry to get into this space. And so there's that side. And there's also the zoning reform side, and that can't be ignored in this conversation as well. And there's a lot of really great housing advocates that are looking at making some really transformative change there too. I completely agree. It's not just building rental infrastructure, it's creating pathways to ownership, which is at the heart of the vision plan. And so we're going to be looking at building out programs with the appropriate funding sources and saying, okay, who wants to join us in building this out and leveraging those funds so that we can make more transformative change. Certainly in the city of St. Paul and other communities want to have that conversation, including our suburban community partners who want to say, we want to ensure that our affordable single-family housing stock remains affordable. I've had so many conversations with leadership in suburban Ramsey County who want to be a part of that as well. And so I certainly see that being a strong part of the HRA levy, and we hope that we can leverage other funding sources to make sizable change there as well.
Thank you. I just want to make sure it didn't get lost in this, that, you know, as I got to participate in your HRA tour, I don't want people to think that with this specific investment that I support, that we're throwing away the other stuff that we talked about. So just to be really clear and say it on record, like this doesn't negate any of the discussions we've had around HRA. Home ownership and affordable home ownership is still part of the plan. These funds that we're seeing for this once-in-a-lifetime investment need to go close this gigantic 15,000 unit gap, and that's what we're doing here. And then my last point is not really a question, but to Commissioner McDonough's point on can we allocate more? I know you are a small but mighty team, and you are working on building out, and that it takes time to develop those infrastructure and protocols, but I'll just reiterate a willingness to be as aggressive as you think you can manage in this ask, and I'm supportive of it.
Thank you very much, and also for basing your question in that fuller continuum. Turn to Commissioner Manis-Castillo.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this great work. And this is a first step to allocate funds. The who and how it is the next steps will be developed. We don't know that yet. We don't know what projects are going to get funded. And am just going to echo Commissioner Fretham's comments about climate resiliency. And actually your scenario of who gets to register first for a conference is a really good one here as well, because we know that climate impacts in housing in particular are even going to be more disproportionate of people of color. And so we really need to think about how we're doing that. It aligns with our other goals. I know it was a not bolded sentence on your slide, but I think it's definitely something we should consider bolding. And it's more than just reducing the cost of utilities. That is a critical place in the housing affordability, but it is about long-term, what does that really mean? And so as we think about the who and how we'll receive these funds we're appropriating, we need to make sure that the climate resiliency, green building infrastructure is emphasized and not depend on, I appreciate the Met Council and Minnesota Housing doing that work as well, but we need to do it as a county as well. So I just want to echo those comments. I think this is we're in a critical moment, as we all know. It's exciting if you've opened the paper in the last 3 days, there's been tremendous stories about reducing redlining and what that means in our community and our housing affordability, as well as zoning reform. And we've got some legislators that are going to champion that at the House this year, which is exciting. And it's an opportunity for us to partner in that way, because we've really laid out this great economic inclusion plan. And now it's exciting to see other people are joining that team. And so to keep moving forward, I am with Commissioner McDonough. I always say we need more. We could not, even if we're not going to do this, don't panic, but even if we put all of our ARPA funds into housing, we would still need more. And so if we can do more, if we can move it faster, I think it's a great way. But again, we want to also make sure we have capacity, and there's a lot of other things. But I would agree with that. And I think it's important to hear, in the community here, that we are right now, this is an allocation of 10 million. We have 27 million that we have essentially marked for housing, which is a third of our overall allocation, which is a really good start because we're committed to this work. So just wanted to make those few comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to turn to Commissioner McGuire, then Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to add my voice and highlight the comments that my colleagues have made about investing more as much as we can with capacity concerns, I know, but just whatever we can do to make these investments even greater. I support that. I want to just add my support to the climate resiliency impact, and we talked about it yesterday in our legislative team meeting about we maybe have a conversation about adding a component on our request for board actions on what the impact on our climate is. And so I definitely support that work, support all the work that's hopefully going to be done at the legislature on transformative change in zoning and whatever we can do there. I just want to ask if you could just comment on how we're working with our community partners, our cities, because we're all out in our community, and they want to do good work as well, and they want to make sure that we're working together, leveraging as many dollars as we can, and they need some help with that. So I know you're doing that. Could you just, and I know this is not about the leveraging partners, I think that was number 4, but could you just give a few comments on how we're working with our community partners?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner McGuire. We, since I think the start, maybe a few months ago, was May or so, started having monthly meetings with our city partners to talk about kind of co-creation of HRA levy programming to ensure that there's no surprises along the way, and wanted to get their input so that we don't, create programming that isn't going to work for the wide landscape that is Ramsey County. And since the kind of arrival of the ARPA funds, we're taking a lot of that feedback and we're saying, okay, if we could do more, cities, where would you put it? And if we're able to, gap finance various projects, do you have projects in the pipeline? And I have to say in the last couple months, both the housing development manager and I have fielded many calls from our community partners to say, we've got a project in the pipeline, we've got a project in the pipeline, and they're very eager to maybe leverage their allocation with ours to see that move quickly. And so I know there's a lot of they are very eager, and I think we've been waiting to have this conversation with the board so that we can understand what we're bringing to the table, both now and what we may bring to the table moving forward, so we can have more informed conversations about what's possible. And so we have been in constant communication with our communities and our city partners about kind of the realm of possibility, because I would say most communities, certainly at City of St. Paul and suburban Ramsey County, have a project or two in the pipeline that they want to get moving.
Thank you. Thank you for all that work. I'll go to Commissioner Reinhardt and then look around to see if there are others. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Well, I also, the work in climate change, climate resiliency has been something that I have worked on for many, many years. And it is heartening in some ways anyhow to see that at the National Association of Counties level and at other levels, state level, that there is a recognition that we need to start really practicing what we preach in that particular area as well. Most of you probably saw the Pioneer Press this morning, and it's the headline is Code Red, UN scientists warn of worsening global warming. And you know, sometimes you don't want to sound an alarm, but we need to sound the alarm. Code Red. And I know from the work that I have done throughout this country and actually in Europe as well, and the information that we have, is that realistically we've got 6 years to make some major changes, or it will be beyond what we can do. Not very long. I mean, sometimes we talk about things that are generational and, oh, well, my grandchildren. Well, yes, my grandchildren, but my children and I will be impacted by this as well. And there are some small changes that can make a big difference, but there are big changes that are coming as well. And so incorporating that into what we do for long-term resiliency and sustainability in the housing area, I think is really great, and I'm really glad that it's been brought up here. There are ways that we can incentivize and make sure that people are looking at that longer term issue, because I mean, it's a matter of survival, literally. And so I appreciate that being brought up. Regarding Commissioner McDonough, you asked for some feedback on what you had said. I agree that we need to have the funds allocated, and because you need to allocate them before you can figure out what to really do with them. And I guess I am, you know, I would be willing to go up to 20 million, but it really, because I don't think the 37 million, I just don't think we have the capacity for that, but I don't know that we have the capacity to ramp up and leverage some of the other funds that will likely be coming as well. And so you chose to say 10 million and 27 million. And I am making the assumption that you had a reason for that. So can you speak to that? Because clearly it's going to cost more. But we need to be able to leverage, we need to be able to get the money out, not just set it there and not have it doing what we want it to do.
I'll ask for that response both from the county manager and from the director.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, thank you, and to the earlier comments as well. And this is all a little bit of how we piece the puzzle together on the table, so I want to acknowledge there's no like hard and fast spot here, and Carrie would take more money if we could, for sure, if she wants more money, like she's going to say yeah, all the things you guys are saying. So it's not a capacity issue on the inside. What it really is the way the federal government allocated half the money now and half later constrains a little bit from the idea that we see it as 107, but on a financial side, we actually see it as 53. And so this is a bit of an issue. You're going to hear approximately $35 million worth of other items coming through between now and September 15th. However, let me say it this way. That is not to say so this is a way to let everything be heard while getting some money out the door for the reasons cited right now, but it was not intended to try and say this is the most aggressive you could do. As the things you're going to hear the rest of the way are going to be more tier 1 and 2. And I think as you go, you're going to hear less and less of tier 1 and 2, like through this overall process, and tier 5 can take on a larger role. That being said, I think that from like looking at, and I'm playing a little fast and loose here, but like I got the ARP spreadsheet up with everything on it and everything else. I think if the board wanted to be more declarative on the front end and say, we want to put 20 million here, that is absolutely something that could be absorbed. There are trade-offs to that in terms of potentially having to push something like the small business ecosystem a little bit farther out. And that's a trade-off in the CED world where that's a trade-off, and that's okay. We just need to make some of those decisions. I guess, and so I support the idea of doing it either way. What I'm trying to do is craft maybe a way in which we could come back with a second housing piece this year even. And that's why we put down May, was the idea of May is when the second tranche comes in, do it right away. At the end of the day, it's this. If the board feels more comfortable wanting to move 20 million now, that there's a path to do that. We can retime some of the other funding accordingly, particularly as it relates to tiers 2 and 3 in the budget, because the budget doesn't actually start until next year. So you could move some of that away from the front end and say, let's have some of that be the second year of the ARPA funding. That's kind of the mechanics of it. And I could work with the CFO on how to make that happen. And finally, the board could say in the resolution, as we're listening to this today, you can pre-allocate the full 37 million now, regardless of how much you upfront. So if you want to do 20 now, that's one thing, but you should, like, I also hear this, and we would be in full agreement on, we can have the RBA next week say, we are allocating 37 million of the broader piece to get to the concern of, are we actually committing to this funding? And I'll go one last step, which, and then I'll be quiet. I would actually encourage the board to consider, based on this conversation, saying, and any remaining funding that is available in ARPA beyond the initial allocations given, this is the priority to put it in tier 5. And that's consistent, I believe, with discussions to date, and that would be the most declarative way to say we are not looking to take another 15 $1 million proposals in the end.
That gives us a good deal of runway, and for the opportunity to discuss later, I will check in also with the director.
You know, I'll defer to the county manager on this, and I know that both the county manager and the CFO have done an incredible amount of work in navigating what, you know, all of the need is right now, and there's an incredible amount of need across the entire county, and they certainly have a better pulse on the bigger picture, and so I will certainly defer to their judgment here.
Thank you very much, and we heard him also deferring to you for your judgment around what's happening in CED, so we'll appreciate that partnership. Commissioner McDonough, then Commissioner Ortega.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would fully support the approach you just laid out, right? Bump it up to 20, fully commit the 37 million, have a resolution in there recognizing that there is a priority and unallocated funds into the future. My only comment moving forward, and this is why I really wanted us to have this conversation, right? So, because tier 5 is the one that really is going to have the long-term sustain. Certainly there are going to be tier 1, tier 2. You know, you suggested that, you know, by doing that, it may kind of delay or push the small business ecosystem. I want to suggest that it should test tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 to the max, right? Are there other ways to do it? Is it really that? Because people are going to make their arguments. Immediate relief, they are, and they're not always wrong, but for us as the priority we're setting. So I would suggest, 20 million, allocate the whole thing, future things, and then as you're, being tested on where dollars go, don't gravitate to that. This might kick down other tier 5 programs. But it really needs to test the tier 1, 2, and 3, and 4 programs to make sure that they fit what we had intended it to be.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McDonough, just one add-on to that, no disagreement on any of that. DEED is one spot where we're trying to explore some of the small business ecosystem world, and there's some follow-up conversations potentially with greater MSP there. So just know that is occurring. That's partly why we weren't comfortable bringing something here today. The only plug I want to make on a tier 1 piece, so the violence prevention piece that's going to come forward in tier 1, I think you will see it as both a tier 1 leading to tier 5. It starts as tier 1 because of the here and now in front of us. In some ways, it's not that dissimilar to housing, right? It's a here and now and a long term. And the system needs to change over the long term, but there's a piece you need to begin to do right away. And so I do see some opportunity that others are not just going to be short-term pieces, but actually long-term as well. And I'm hopeful that we'll all see the same. But this does not undercut that work coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
On this point, and
Yes.
then we'll go quickly to Commissioner Ortega. Go ahead.
I thought I heard you say that the 20 million now and the full 37, I thought that those were two separate things. My question is this. I think if we allocate the full 37 million, and we do it in the 10 million and 27 million, but it's allocated in our action, and we have, and the extra, anything extra going into category, or tier 5, sorry. But I also heard you say, County Manager O'Connor, that we're going to have 35 million coming in by September 11th, which means a lot of work's already been done on trying to figure out how those funds are used. And as long as we're going to allocate the 37 million, I would rather see that the work that's already been done and what might have to shift. I think we're at August 10th right now. I guess I would hate to see us throw all of that into some chaos when we're really talking about a matter of months, and we're still going to get the 37 million out there. So I don't want something that is already ready to come to us in September then somehow knocked out of the way when we're going to get the 37 million in anyway, and we can make that commitment next week.
Just a point of information as to what you were saying
Yes.
there.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, we can do the 20 million this year without disrupting things the way you suggested, and then fully obligate the 37. Well, it'll cause some, I was thinking out loud, and I'm sorry if I caused confusion. It will cause us to retime some of the pieces, particularly the tier 2 and 3 in the budget, but it doesn't affect what's in the budget because the budget doesn't actually start until January of next year. So it can be done. We just can't do that on every proposal coming forward after this one, and this is uniquely tier 5, and what I hear the board saying is make your tier 5 go now, and that's good. I'm just highlighting it narrows your future range of being able to do that in the same way for everything else that comes in, right?
Okay, so just to be clear, the small business incentives, the other things that are included don't have to be put off, or do they? Because that's where I'm concerned about that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, or Commissioner Reinhardt, apologies. The housing supports, the violence prevention, the racial equity community engagement work, and the budget work are the first 4 coming through based on what we laid out last week. Small business will fit in somewhere. We're still talking to deed. We're not quite sure what that looks like, so I don't have a proposal ready anyway. So it's not that I'm pushing something off, but it is something that this conversation today, we'll take that back as we think about what a proposal looks like, is all I would say.
Thank you.
Okay.
And we will have the
Thank you.
opportunity to see that coming forward.
That was very helpful.
Commissioner Ortega, then McGuire, and we're going to be moving on, I know. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fully supportive of everything all my colleagues said. My concern is that we really look at the whole picture here, because I heard of climate change, I've heard a lot of other issues. And the reality is something's going to fall off the table. We got to be real about that. So again, I have no problems with the discussion, what everybody said, but I would like to know how that whole picture falls and how we use our money smart. What's first, what's second? So we have enough resources, because at the end of the day, it's about sustaining this, not for the next 2 or 3 years, but for the next 5 and 10 years. Housing is a big issue, and it's not going to be resolved with this pot of money. It's about looking at forward 5, 10 years. I mean, we're talking about tough issues, not just the affordable housing, but the home ownership for communities. So I want to make sure we just don't start something 5 years later, we drop it because of the flavor of the month.
And I want to appreciate that and the framework that we've been building all along, and seeing these week-to-week proposals and then having the opportunity to vote on them the next week allows us these kinds of discussions so that we can continue to look at that framework, ensure that we're taking care to make sure things don't fall off without our knowledge of what choices are being made. So I do want to check what other thoughts you may have regarding that, appreciating that that is the type of walk we are taking. allowing for these kinds of conversations.
Madam Chair, when we bring back the request for board action next week, I'll bring the best snapshot of where we sit point in time back as a part of that, so the board can hear that update based on today's conversation.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. Commissioner McGuire?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick clarification. When we say 20 million and then the full 37, is the 20 million is part of that 37 million? So just so people don't know, we're doing 20 million, then 37 on top of that. I mean, we all think we all know we need that, but that's not what we're able to do. But it's, the 20 is part of the 37, yeah. Just wanted to clarify, people watching.
Thank you all so very much for all the comments, questions, suggestions, and improvements that we've been able to make as we've heard the policy discussion here, and as we know that we will see it back and be able to vote to move the investment in this transformative housing work that we are talking about forward. So thank you to the director, to the county manager. We've talked about this full continuum of work, being able to invest along the continuum and taking care of those most emergent needs today, but also looking at the transformation so that we're able to move uphill. We will hear back from you next week. Are there any final comments? Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good work indeed. Looking back at our agenda, then we're at that point where we'll ask for county connections from the county manager. We'll have the opportunity for brief updates from our commissioners, and then we'll be moving on to an HRA meeting, a tax forfeited modernization project update, and this afternoon have a CARES workshop. But I just wanted to note that we have a lot to do this morning. County manager for county connections.
Madam Chair, I'm not going to name all 35, but 35 people were deeply involved in the planning of the Sunisa Lee event that we were able to discuss earlier today. It came together on a very rapid timeline to make it happen. I do want to give a special call out to Lisa Hansen-Lamy over in Parks and Recreation, who runs Aldrich Arena day to day. She was amazing to get to work with on this. Lydia Gurma was running point through the different connections with the planning committee and working very close with Lisa. And then just a few other shout outs to Gene Kruger in property management, Sarah Holly, Kim Closey and their team in public health on the vaccine side and keeping everybody safe. It really was a team effort, and there's a lot of unsung behind the scenes work that goes on, but I wanted to elevate a few names today out of appreciation. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for that update. I will just add to that my appreciation for Mi Chang and our board clerk's office and the work that was done to secure the proclamation we had this morning on very, very short order. Thank you so very, very much. I'll turn to other commissioners and we'll go around the table, starting with Commissioner McDonough for our outside board and committee reports. Commissioner McDonough.
I'll take a minute. You recognize me. I want to take a minute to recognize Lydia and our parks folks because they really scrambled to make this happen at Aldrich. And there wasn't a lot of clarity early on about quite where things were going to go. But they stuck with it, and so they really did a nice job. And Brian, you had assigned Lydia kind of the coordinating role there, and they did a great job. So I just want to publicly acknowledge that.
Thank you. And thank you for your contacts and communications early on to make that happen as well.
Other than that, no more. I'm done.
Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just want to recognize a couple of things that happened in the community. One exciting, another grand opening, ribbon cutting in New Brighton. They're attracting these great businesses, and it's just been really fun to do that. Foxtrot Marketing left South St. Paul to be in New Brighton. It was their 35th or 45th anniversary celebration of their company, and they are I want to just read this because it's so exciting. They are a product, or they're with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and I want to read their mission statement because it is so great, and I have it here somewhere. Here it is. They support the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe and their mission to generate economic stability and opportunity for all people in the region by helping build a social and economic foundation that will last for generations. Their shared core values of honesty, bravery, love, wisdom, humility, truth, and respect are all Ojibwe grandfather teachings that they demonstrate in daily interactions with partners, suppliers, and each other. And it was just a great celebration of that, and I just was so moved by their mission statement, and we're very excited. They have 50 employees in New Brighton, another 15 to 20 throughout the Midwest region, and anyway, it's a great company that's now in Ramsey County. Just a couple of upcoming meetings happening. The Early Care and Education for Children, formerly the Child Care Policy Action Team, is meeting tomorrow between 1 and 2 on Zoom. So that group is continuing to work, and the partners are very happy about that. Ramsey County League of Local Governments is going to have their first in-person meeting on Thursday night from 6 to 7:30 at Keller Regional Park. So if anyone is able to be there, I think it'll be outdoors, but of course you can wear masks if you choose, but it is the first person gathering. Rice and Larpenteur is also having their gathering on Saturday as well. And then I just want to take a moment to recognize someone that many of us may have come into contact with, but Rob Lageson is a coach at Central Park, and he's been a strong advocate for our Battle Creek Regional Park and our winter recreation area. He's a cross-country ski coach there, and he and his wife Jan are good friends of mine, but they lost their daughter, their 33-year-old daughter, to a brain bleed unexpectedly last week, and the celebration of life is on Friday, and it's just such a sad event, and they've been just strong Ramsey County advocates and partners with us in the work that we do, and I just wanted to send them love and support as they deal with that tragedy in their lives. So thank you for that.
And thank you very much. Commissioner Ortega?
No report.
Thank you. Commissioner Fretham?
Just a busy week of meetings, CAP-RW, Generation Next, my first meeting with the state subcommittee on children's mental health. Just keeping busy, and want to remind folks my last 4 dialogue circles related to the Rice Creek Commons development will be happening on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 2 are virtual, and we're going to be moving them from a Teams to a Zoom platform. On Thursday and Sunday, they will be in person at 2 different parks in Arden Hills, and so that information is all available. If anyone has questions, want to reach out to my office, and we'll connect you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Reinhardt?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and yeah, a lot of meetings and a lot of really good work. And one of the things that I wanted to just do as far as an outside board and committee report is to say that sometimes, as we all know, we're all public servants and we're doing our best. We really put our heart and souls into the work that we do here and really try to listen and don't always agree, but respect. Respect is the thing. And so this last week, it seemed like there was, let's face it, there are a minority of people that think that we are not real human beings. And so some of the disrespect that comes by, you just have to wonder. But I wanted to say thank you to all of the people that they can respectfully disagree or appreciate the work that you do. And instead of dwelling on, which is human nature, to dwell on the negative, to celebrate the positive. And because we're all doing the best we can. And I appreciate and thank the people that have show respect to everyone, not just to me or to other elected officials, but that show respect as we're moving forward in these very difficult times, very challenging times. So big thank you for the positivity.
Thank you. Commissioner Matis Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This weekend, coming weekend, obviously some really exciting things happening. It is the Corinne Martyrs Day celebration, which recognizes the death of their beloved leader, 71 years anniversary, but there's exciting events on Saturday from 8:30 through the weekend at the Mississippi Elementary School in the field with sporting events and speakers and really amazing food, so I encourage people to join the Corinne Martyrs Day celebration. And then also the Rice Larpenter, as Commissioner McGuire mentioned, is their summer block party. Really exciting stuff happening there as well from 11 to 3 with art events and and come see what all the work has gone on in the Rice Larpent area. We've invested heavily as a county. There's tremendous change happening. There's a park like now in place. There's community and public art in place, new signage. It really is a testament to when lots of good-minded folks get together and invest and turn around a neighborhood. So great things happening there as well. And then also tomorrow, and Commissioner Carter, you probably want to mention it too, is the Dale Street reconstruction ribbon cutting, which is pretty awesome. And I know you were actively involved in that and the great work that's happened on Dale Street and all of our partners as well.
Thank you very, very much, Commissioner Matis Castillo. And yes, that is the final item that I would have mentioned. I'll mention it again. It will happen tomorrow at 9 o'clock. It is the Dale Street Bridge celebration. We'll be convening initially at the library on University and Dale, and walking from the library, stopping at the public area that comes right before 94, crossing the bridge at 94, and doing our ribbon cutting together there. So I hope that community and those of you who are available can certainly join. We are encouraged by the process of working with community toward equity in that space, ensuring that the bridge would reconnect, it would reflect, and it would respect our communities in that area and those who join us coming through the area on a regular basis. And this bridge project has been an exemplar and a representative of the kind of work that our county team, together with our community, can do to lift us all up. So again, that's tomorrow at 9 o'clock a.m. I mentioned that we have a lot of work to go. Next, a Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting, Commissioner Matis Castillo will chair here. And then following, we'll stay here for a tax forfeited land modernization project update. Commissioner McGuire will be chairing that here in the chambers. And then at 1:30, we will have a CARES evaluation workshop series on community and vendor engagement in our county board office. It will be available to the public via the Zoom link posted on our site, and Commissioner Reinhardt will be chairing that workshop. With that, our county board meeting is now adjourned.
Will you please call the roll?
Carter?
Here.
Freda?
Here.
McDonough?
Here.
McGuire?
Here.
Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt?